Ready to go?
Let's do it.
Hey, it's Team Odyssey. We're on today with somebody really special. My partner, Jordan Queen.
How's everybody doing?
Today, we have the opportunity to share some time with a man who is the absolute greatest at what he does. He's been called the best interviewer in the business. Although that's true, it doesn't quite do him justice. He's not just an interviewer. He's a journalist, commentator, a performer. He's a producer, excelling in everything he does. 7-time Emmy winner, a 7-time Cable Ace Award winner, and an inductee in the California Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. He's meant a lot to me since I first saw his television show on Up Close. His wisdom and insight, professionalism, and the ability to get the best out of his guests has changed many people's lives. And today we get to spend time with the great Roy Firestone.
Well, thank you, Chris. Thank you for that introduction. I really appreciate it. And the check is in the mail.
Thank you.
We're not used to that.
Very nice. I'm going to hire you for my PR department.
Hey, there's three people, in all fairness, I want to say this. There's 3 people in my life that I would love to sit down and talk to. One of them's Jackie Robinson.
Oh, yeah.
One of them's Rod Serling from the Tonight or the
Twilight Zone.
Twilight Zone. And the other one's you.
Well, that's interesting. First of all, thank you. I'm very flattered to even be in that group. The 2 other people you named are 2 of my people I'd most want to interview. Interesting that you said that. Yeah. Jackie Robinson, for sure. I didn't start in this business on interviewing on TV until 75. I think Jackie was gone in 72. Rod Serling I never met, but interesting, just for those who may even know who Rod Serling is or may not, he was the creator of the Twilight Zone, which was a now legendary show that was aired about 65 years ago or so. And interesting to note that his daughter was in our carpool with her kids, with my kids. So I got to talk about her father, and I stumbled into that. Her name is Ann Serling. And she lives out in Los Angeles. And she told me one quick story. I'll tell you. She said that sometimes they wouldn't have a whole show thought through. And so Rod Serling, and his other co-writer and producer, a guy named Buck Houghton, would write the scripts on the way to the studio in the back of the car while they were being driven to the show. Wow. So there were some days where he didn't even have a whole show on the way to work. And by the time they got to work, with traffic being an hour, they'd finish the script and they'd have a show ready to be locked out on a Monday, as he did it in a car on the way to work. Incredible.
I'm still amazed at his foresight into today's society.
Oh, yeah. Well, a lot of things, and again, I don't want to date myself too much. I don't know how your demographics are in terms of youth, but for those who don't know the Twilight Zone, you should watch it. It's probably all over YouTube.
Yeah.
But it was ahead of its time in terms of its look at social issues, things like bigotry, racism, greed, politics, government. It was a very interesting show, especially for its time. And of course, Rod would eventually go to a show called Night Gallery, and he also directed and produced many other entities, including films as well. He was a real brilliant guy. I'm always reluctant to use the word, genius, but he was pretty much close to any kind of genius who would be in the television or production business or directing business.
It really was. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we could talk about other stuff, but that's interesting you brought that up first, because I very, very rarely get to talk about Rod.
Yeah, he's a cool guy. I didn't know he was one of your favorites either.
Oh, very influential in my writings too. The way I write, definitely.
Well, I guess to date myself a little bit, I'm probably the youngest of the crew here. The first episode Up Close I ever saw was you interviewing Bill Lambier and you interviewing Dennis Rodman as a Spur. I was a big Pistons fan growing up, being from Michigan, but I'm not gonna lie. After that, it really got me hooked on just I was talking to Chris earlier. You did everything with class. Every interview that you ever gave was with class. And if you notice nowadays, it's not like that anymore. Everything's shock value TV. And, you really started off with class. Do you think that there's anybody out there right now that can compare to, or not compare, but that does things kind of the way that you used to do them?
Well, it's a good question, and it's a fair question. First of all, thank you, Jordan. I appreciate that very much. And before I answer your question, I just interviewed Rodman again for a new series I'm doing at ESPN. They're 3 1 hours. They're specials, not really a series, but they're 3 1 hour specials. First one's May 30th. The show is called GOATs, GOATS, greatest of all time. And we've interviewed 16 gigantic figures in sports. And one of them was Rodman. And he was every bit as great. And I think I probably was a better interview than anything I ever did with him. And he was pretty good on my show. And one other thing before I answer your question directly, Rodman was the prototype for Jerry Maguire, Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character. And they really originally wanted Rodman to play Rod Tidwell in Jerry Maguire. Of course, people may know me from Jerry Maguire, Don't Make Me Cry, Roy, et cetera, et cetera. But Rodman turned them down.
What?
And he didn't want to be an actor at that time anyway. And I think he's still kicking himself because Cuba Gooding Jr. ended up winning the Academy Award. But in answer to your question, I thank you for the compliment. And I don't want to say this with any self-aggrandizement, but I really do feel that there are very few vehicles now for sports interviewing in its long form status. I am aware of the fact that they actually have an up close, believe it or not now. I don't even know if there's any buzz about it. A young woman named Sage Steele, I'm sure she does a great job, but I don't even hear anyone talking about it. And that was the name of my old show.
Right.
I think what's happened is because of social media, they lean now, I say they, the broadcast executives lean now to outrage or outrageous things that were said, opinions, short takes, bursts of anger and feuding. I see where Chris Russo, Mad Dog Russo, just signed a deal that he's going to be now doing Stephen A. Smith. By the way, I interviewed Stephen A. Smith recently. His story was pretty remarkable that no one knows. And I did not realize that the reason he's named Stephen A. Smith is because whenever he would get in trouble with his mother, she'd yell, "Stephen A. Smith, get over here." And so, and that's a true story. And part of the reason he got into this business, he was a newspaper guy for many, many years, was because he said, and I appreciate it, that he watched my show, that I was a big influence on him. So the answer to the question, Jordan, is I don't think there's a lot of opportunities these days for long form interviewing for sports, or really for a lot of things. If you think about it, everything is so segmented now, and everything is so parsed and shortened to sound bites. And I think it's a shame, because I think athletes really do like to have a vehicle that people can see what they have to say in an unedited format. And we did that show for, parts of 3 different decades.
Yeah.
And 80, 90, and the new millennium. And I was just so flattered to do it. I did 5,000, 6,000 interviews in my life. And I had an amazing time doing it. Still would like to do it again, but the opportunity has to present itself. Right now it hasn't.
Well, I wish it would. Because here's the thing, I used to watch it, and you made these people human.
Yes.
You brought out a different element, and we saw them as athletes and performing and all that stuff, but we never got a chance to see that. You were really the first person to ever bring that out for me personally.
Well, I appreciate that. And again, I'm humbled by, your statement. And I had my own mentors too. I mean, people like Howard Cosell were very influential to me. Tom Snyder, I don't know how many people remember Tom Snyder. He used to do the late night show, the Tomorrow Show, but also Ted Koppel was one. And there were other people who were great interview. Bob Costas remains a close friend of mine. I think he's one of the best, if not the very best in the business. So I had a lot of people who influenced me as well. And I like to think that, in the best of my efforts, that I influenced other people too, that I did really, I don't say I shaped anything or made a difference in broadcasting or any of that stuff, but I like to think that people could see the show, enjoy the show, learn something that they didn't know about the athlete, and take it with them in their heart and their brain or whatever for years to come. And also a lot of it is still on YouTube. A lot of the show is still on YouTube. And with this new series that I'm doing at ESPN, I get to interview again. So that was a great blessing for me.
Do you get to keep all your old interviews? Do you keep a record of them yourself?
Well, it's funny you said that. I don't own all of them, but I own some shows I did. I did a show for Mark Cuban called Face to Face. I own 100 half hours of that. And some of it's dated, but some of it isn't. But as far as the ESPN show, I don't own them. But when we were leaving the series, they were getting ready to throw out the tapes. Can you believe that? And I
Wow.
said, hell, I'm not going to let you do that. So in my garage, cross-indexed and organized, are about 1,500 of the shows. And
Wow.
they were some of the best shows we ever had. They're on 3/4 inch. I don't know what kind of shape they're in right now, but they've been in storage for some time. And I would love, you know what I would really love to do is do a kind of retrospective. Once a month, do some shows of somebody who passed or somebody who there's an anniversary. I just did an essay about Hank Aaron that's going to be airing. And I would have loved to, like on Jackie Robinson Day, maybe go back and look at my interview with Rachel Robinson or Don Newcomb or some of the people who knew Jackie. And so I think, it's a shame because I think you have all those shows in storage at ESPN. I have some of them too, that people aren't utilizing the history of what we brought to the broadcast.
I'm gonna make Chris laugh here for a minute. And he's gonna crack up because he already knows what I'm gonna say. There's an inside joke that we have. I honestly do think though it would be good for the youth to see how it was done. I would love to see something, whether it be on ESPN Classic or whether it even be sold to Amazon Video, like to have a seasonal of your shows.
It's easy. It's interesting. You just said Amazon Video. I'm pitching a show for Amazon, and it's called Up Closer, where we revisit, or that's a working title, Up Closer, but I don't know if we'll get away with it. But we want to revisit some of the interviews we did. So if we talk to Jordan, I talked to him at 19. You now talk to him at 60 or 58, whatever he is.
Yeah.
And then look back at the clips and have them respond. And I do think we did have our show on ESPN Classic for a while, for many years actually. But I do think there's updates that we could do. I think I know I'm a better interviewer than I have ever been. I've done a lot of interviews. I'm going to be doing some stuff for the University of Miami football program, interviewing the coaches and some of the legends who played there: Jimmy Johnson, Michael Irvin, Vinny Testaverde, Bernie Kosar, those kind of players. We're going to do that for a short series for Miami. But I love interviewing, and I'll do interviewing, I hope, for a long time. I'm still young enough where I really still enjoy it. I'm very curious. And if Amazon comes through, you'll be the first to know.
I would love to see what Rod Tidwell is doing post-retirement.
Yeah. It's funny. It's funny you say that because I used to do the morning show, the morning news for sports in Los Angeles just a few years ago. And one day Cuba Gooding Jr. was on the show and they had me cross talking with Rod Tidwell, or Cuba Gooding Jr., of course. And it was very interesting. He said, "Don't make me cry, Roy." We did it all over again. The funny story about that is, I'll make it as brief as I can. I got the job to play Roy Firestone, and they were looking for a Roy Firestone type, if you can believe it.
Wow.
So I think I fit the bill. I go to Sony Pictures and I'm looking for the studio, the set. And, there's, 30, 40 different studios and sets and sound stages. And I went from one to another. Finally, I hit one. I knocked on the door. I opened the door and Tom Cruise answers the door, literally. And he says, have you been with Cuba yet? And I said, well, I lived in Miami because I didn't know who Cuba Gooding was. So he says, what are you talking about? I said, Cuba Gooding. He goes, Cuba Gooding. And I went, what's that? And I never heard of him. He wasn't a star at the time.
Right.
Anyway, we do the show. We do the scene. I hadn't really rehearsed it because I assumed it was going to end up on the cutting room floor. And the scene where he gets the money, if you might remember the scene, he jumps across the table to hug me, to thank me. And I wasn't ready for it. And I started falling back on my chair. I almost went over because it was on a rolling chair and they had to grab me. The scene goes, the movie's made. I forget about it. A year later, my friend says, my God, with Jerry Maguire. I said, who is Jerry Maguire? He goes, that's the movie with Tom Cruise. I said, oh, did it make the cut? He goes, make the cut. It's a huge scene in the movie. And I had no idea. 6 months after that, I'm in Liverpool, England, and I'm at a reception. And it was at the Cavern Club where the Beatles started their careers.
Oh,
And I'm
wow.
at a party at a reception, and I get a tap on my shoulder, and I turn around, and it's Sir Paul McCartney. And he says to
Wow.
me, I think I know you. And I
Yeah.
said, I don't know if you know me, Paul, but I'm a huge Beatle fan, by the way. It's an amazing thrill for me. I'm just thrilled out of my mind to meet you. He goes, no, I do know you. And I said, I don't think. And then finally, the woman who was with him she said, he means the movie. I said, oh, you mean Jerry Maguire? He goes, that's it.
That's
You're the guy that
movie.
makes him cry. What's your name? And I said, my name is Roy. He goes, don't make me cry, Roy. And that was Paul McCartney. He had seen the
Oh,
movie.
Wow.
He saw the movie 30 times because he was looking to place his music properly. And he had music in the movie, and he was looking to see where he'd want to put the music. And he saw me 30 times. So for 1 minute of my life, Paul McCartney was asking me about what it was
that's
like
great.
to be in a movie. I can't even make this stuff up,
Man, that's a great story.
Yeah.
Hey, when you're good at something, you tell people. When you're great, they tell you. So you got it from the
That's a
best.
nice way of looking at it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm great, but I've really been fortunate, man. I'll tell you, I never look back at anything with any hubris or wow, I'm the best. I'm just so grateful I had the chance. I started in this business. I was bat boy for the Orioles in Miami.
You keep taking our questions, Roy.
Hey, I
was
wanted to
bat.
ask you about that, by the
I
way.
was bat boy when I was 15 years old, and years and years and years and years and years later, Brooks Robinson, who's still alive. He's about 84 or 5. He'll be 80 in May. He'll be 84 or 5. I can't remember. And he called me one night. We've been friends for decades, but he called me one night and he said, Roy, I want you to be the guy who introduces my statue at Oriole Park in Camden Yards. And you got to understand what a thrill that was. That's sort of like the Paul McCartney kind of thrill. He was my childhood hero. Again, some of your audience may not know who Brooks is, but just Google him. The greatest defensive third baseman ever.
He destroyed the Reds with his glove in the '70 World Series.
Yes, he did. That's 52 years ago. It's hard to believe. But these people have all remained my friends. And one last postscript to that story. Not only did I get to do the statue, and incidentally, that's on YouTube too. If you'd like, anybody who's listening wants to look at that speech I did about Brooks. It really got to me. It was very emotional for me because he was my childhood hero. But the other part of it is several years ago when Frank Robinson passed away, Brooks was looking for a hotel to stay in Los Angeles because he was here for memorial. I said, you stay with me. And do you know that Brooks Robinson stayed at my house with Jim Palmer, 3-time Cy Young Award winner. And it was like, I was like a child again. I mean, these were my heroes, and they're staying in my room, eating in my kitchen. It was an incredible experience. It really was.
Did you get to hit ground balls to him or anything? Or
it's funny you asked me that question, but the first day I met Brooks when I was 15, I was so in awe of him. And, he was coming off of the World Series. And I said, he said to me, hey, partner, would you like to hit some ground balls, and I'll hit some ground balls to you. And I went, oh my God, this is surreal. 1 minute, I'm just dreaming of meeting somebody. Next minute, I'm playing pepper or ground balls with Brooks Robinson. What kind of life is that, huh?
That's great, man.
It's amazing to me is because, when we're all kids, at least people like me and Chris, it's like we kind of like you were the bat boy for the Baltimore Orioles. I used to, dream about being a professional athlete or dream about being around them and everything like that. And so do you think that was a driving force for you to do what you did just to kind of at first to be around the players,
It's Jordan, you hit it right on the nose. I remember leaving. I was 15, 16 years old. I used to do they spring training, the Orioles trained in Miami. And so they were only there for a couple of 3 months. But every year they left, it was sad for me. It was like the circus was leaving town, so to speak. And they would go back east. And I said, boy, I really love these guys. I wish there was a way I could keep my friendship, and I don't want to grow old. No one's going to have a 22-year-old bat boy. So I just said, maybe there's a way I could become an interviewer. And really, I think that's the story of how I became an interviewer. As a matter of fact, when Brooks Robinson was with me as a kid. He was my first interview ever. If I did it for the school newspaper, and my tape recorder jammed and it didn't work. And the next day I had to go back to him and say, "I'm sorry, Brooks, but we didn't get it." And I was like terrified to say that to him. And he said, "Let's just do it again." And we did. And I never forgot his kindness, his generosity. And in a lot of ways, Jordan and Chris, Brooks Robinson, again, for those who don't know, Google him. He showed me a degree of, civility and generosity in an athlete. And I always vowed that I would try to emulate that as best I could if I ever got anywhere in my life. And I've been fortunate. So I try to give back a lot in that respect too.
So Brooks was your first interview, like
as a kid, but my very first TV interview was Muhammad Ali. So imagine you're going from Brooks Robinson, your childhood hero, to your all-time hero, Muhammad Ali. And boy, that's a story in itself. I mean, I spent so many years with Muhammad Ali, interviewing him and not interviewing him when he didn't speak anymore, and doing fundraisers for Parkinson's. And one night I was on stage. I did not know this. I was on stage, I perform. I'm a performer. I do corporations and speeches, and I'm a singer.
I don't know if people realize this about you, right? You're actually a fantastic performer.
Well, thank you.
And your impersonations are spot on. So I got to ask you, the Cosell and Ali, one of my favorite ones, though, is the Neil Diamond.
Well, you want me to do something a cappella like Neil Diamond?
Oh, man, dude, you'd make my night if you could.
I'll tell you something, Chris. I was in the car the other day, and remember when you were a little kid and you're watching Sesame Street or whatever that show was, and they're going, "I love you, you love me, we're a happy family." So I'm saying to myself, what would it have been like if they had professional superstar singers sing that song? So I had like Tony Bennett doing, "I love you, you love me, I'm a happy family," like Tony Bennett, right? Then I said, "Well, what about Neil Diamond? I love you and you love me. We're a happy family with a great big kiss," and give I'm singing in the car as these different superstar singers. But I've been doing this for a long time. People, if they do want to get a hold of me, if anyone's doing a corporate event or something, and they would like to bring me in, I do it both virtually, by the way, and in person. You go to royfirestone.com, and there's a whole bunch of previews of what I do.
Hey, Roy, one of my favorite things, though, is when you did Sinatra Does the Village People.
Oh, yeah. I say with him, "Young man, I was once in your shoes, YMCA." I did all that. But I've had orchestras behind me. I play with the symphonies and stuff. And it's just been, people say, you're a sportscaster, why you do that? Well, the truth is, I don't know that there should be any limits in life of what you want to do. I always dreamed of being a performer as well as an interviewer. And I do it a little of both. I played with the Four Tops. I played with the late James Ingram, Loretta Lynn. I did a show with Michael McDonald where I get to sing with Michael McDonald.
Oh, that's awesome.
Incredible thrill. So really, I think life is to be enjoyed.
He lives here in Nashville, or he has a place here.
Yes, he does live in Nashville.
Yeah, I see him.
In fact, I did a show in Nashville, and I got to share the stage with Loretta Lynn, who was pretty much up there in her at the time, and now it's been 20 years since. Yeah. But she was really a gas to be around. I mean, I did 20 minutes at the Grand Ole Opry, the old one, and I mean.
Yeah,
I just can't tell you what a thrill that was. I mean, you're talking to the most fortunate guy ever and grateful guy ever. And I'm just tickled that people even want to hear me do my thing and pay me pretty good money to come do my thing. Yeah. I would do it for free, needless to say. But, I got to open, I don't know, again, if you know the name Lou Rawls, but Lou Rawls in his day was one of the great soul singers. And I did a week with Lou Rawls in Las Vegas. And before I did it, I had Gale Sayers, the great Gale Sayers, on my show. And he goes, "I hear you're going to be playing in Vegas." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, if you play in Vegas, I'm coming out opening night." Ha ha, thanks a lot. You think he's going to He's just saying it. Do you know that opening night he was there? He flew in from
Wow.
Chicago to see
Wow.
me. He knew
See?
Lou Rawls, but he came to see me, and it was just a stunning, thrilling thing to have Gale Sayers come to my opening night. And Jerry Lewis, the great Jerry Lewis, sent me a telegram opening night too. So,
Wow.
I mean, you talk about a guy who's had so many memories, so many great things happen to him. And, I'm still enjoying my life and doing what I do. I've written 4 books. I wrote a children's book this year, last year, I should say. And, um, I'm just grateful and fortunate to be able to do all the things I always wanted to do.
It's funny. Go ahead.
I got to ask you this, Roy. Did you really once throw a rock at Richard Nixon's motorcade?
Well, let me tell you.
And then you guys became really close friends, right?
I don't know, I'm a close friends, but I interviewed him, and I think it was, I want to say 92. I don't know when he passed, but he probably about 5 or 6 years left. I think probably 98, 97, something like that. I'm interviewing him, and we're getting along pretty good. I was not of his politics, shall we say.
Right.
But we're getting along because we're talking baseball. And he was very fun to talk to about. He really knew his baseball, and he enjoyed talking about baseball. In fact, he knew that I was a Brooks Robinson fan. He goes, I always thought that Mike Schmidt was the better player. And he was telling me he could hit more home runs. And I say, okay. Anyway, so we're changing tapes. And I said to the former president Nixon, I said, listen, Mr. President, I'm not going to lie to you. We differ politically, but we can get along because we're talking baseball. He goes, that's fine. I said, yeah. I said, but to tell you the truth, how much we differed when I was 17 years old in Miami, Florida, and the Republican National Convention was there. My friend Bob and I threw a rocket your limousine. I don't even know why the hell I said this. And he looked at me without missing a beat. And he goes, well, I guess you're pardoned too. It's a great story.
It's funny is because I heard you said that he'd be a hell of a baseball manager.
Well, he would have been a good commissioner for sure. And I think if he was a manager, he'd be bugging the other clubhouse, I think. No, I shouldn't say that. No, it was really cool because Nixon, and I think there should be some pictures, might be on the internet, but Nixon and I did over an hour and a half. And as I was leaving, I had to go back with my crew because that's the only way I had my ride. He wanted me to stay and have a drink and talk sports. And I should have just those days there was no Uber, so I should have just taken him up on it. But it was pretty cool, man, to be around Nixon and not talk politics, just get along with the guy. And by the end of the interview, he kind of liked me. He kind of kicked at it. He wouldn't have asked me to have a drink with him if he didn't. And he watched the show regularly. He even remembered me in Miami as a young reporter, sports anchor, because he used to live down in Miami in Key Biscayne with Baby Rebozo. And he told me he used to watch me. It was surreal. The whole thing was surreal. It really was.
Well, it's funny.
You forget that it's just another guy watching your show,
Well, you've interviewed over 5,000 people, Roy. And, the question is like, has anyone made you nervous to interview? Have you been nervous?
I was pretty close in that one because it was Nixon, and he hadn't really been interviewed more than a handful of times since Watergate.
Right.
And the only ground rules were we only want to talk baseball, and I was happy to do it. And we got along great. And it also taught me something about the language of sports. I think what's left for sports is we can disagree about our favorite teams and issues, and they try to play on that a little bit, the disagreement and the yelling and the screaming, but it's still a way for us to get along talking sports. I could talk someone who differs politically with me, vehemently differs, and if we both love the same team, we're pals. And that's a great thing about sports. But in answer to your question, Nixon made me a little nervous. Initially, Ted Williams made me nervous. He intimidated me a little bit, but I warmed up and he ended up becoming a friend. It was great to have. I have stuff in my house, memorabilia. He signed bat with me, wrote a whole letter out on the thing. It was a great experience, but very few, it really, really intimidated me. And I was just lucky that I had the vehicle to use that show. and to communicate my thoughts about, sports. And I wasn't the expert. There are a lot better, more well-versed people than I, but I do think I had some humanity in those interviews. And I like to think that I had some memorable interviews, and I'm just grateful and proud that I was able to do it for as long as I did.
Hey, did anybody in particular you just didn't mesh with as far as the interview? You did.
Well, Bob Knight wasn't the easiest guy. I had some moments with him. I also had, I once had Ted Turner walked off a show with me because he didn't like the line of questioning. And I had, I don't know if you remember Kevin Johnson, guard for Sacramento Kings.
Yeah.
He was also with the Phoenix Suns, of course, primarily. He was late for practice and just took the microphone off in the middle of a question once. But I got
because he was late for practice.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But he wasn't mad or anything. But I've had a couple of Barry Switzer used to coach the Cowboys. Some might remember. He wanted to punch me in the nose one time because I was talking about his family as moonshiners, and I used the phrase "white trash," and I probably shouldn't have used that phrase. And he wanted to slug me, but we got along great afterwards. He was fine. He actually he got a kick out of the whole thing. So I was fortunate that, listen. I'm not an aggressive interviewer. I'm not a guy who goes after people. Some criticize all you want about it. I don't think I'm a softball interviewer either. I think I'm a humane and a human interviewer. And I think that at my best, my show, when it was good, brought out the humanity in people. And those people just happened to be athletes. But, I had writers, I had comedians, I had Jerry Seinfeld on 3 times. I had George Carlin, Don Rickles, tons of people who were funny. I had singers. I had, John Bon Jovi. All these different people came on to talk sports. And of course, thousands and thousands and thousands of athletes. But, again, I mean, I don't know how many people will ever have what I had in this business again.
What did you take away from your interview with Arthur Ashe?
Boy, I could do an hour on that one. I interviewed Arthur from the time I was a young kid in Miami. Of course, he had a residency at the Doral Country Club. And one of the interviews I did, he looked very thin to me, but I had no idea that he had AIDS because he hadn't disclosed it yet. And I saw him and he looked very thin, but I kind of put it in the back of my mind. I thought maybe he was sick and little did I know he was. And I said, after all the years of your travels, what have you come to know about life? And he said, sadly, I've come to realize that it doesn't matter black on black, white on white, Hispanic on Hispanic. Somebody somewhere in some country needs to beat up on somebody else. And he says that the hardest thing that I've come to realize as I'm late in life, and he knew he was dying, by the way, when he was saying it, is that humanity still is at each other's throat. Everyone's after each other. And he says, that's the saddest realization I've made. So that's one of the takeaways. And also that, life is not a given. I mean, it's not guaranteed. Look at poor Kobe Bryant. Look at people who had every expectation to live a long life, Jim Valvano, and they didn't have a long life. And so I learned through Arthur to cherish the moment and remember that you're only on this earth for a short time, and that you should be grateful and also try to do good. I mean, I think he was one of the greatest figures I've ever been around in sports. I've been parts of numerous documentaries about Arthur Ashe. I think he was probably, with John Wooden, the single wisest person I'd ever been around in sports. And my takeaway was he kept giving. He kept being active. He was an activist for humanitarian causes and for civil rights, visited Mandela, the whole thing. And he was one of the most important figures, I think, in all of sports history, not unlike Jackie Robinson, but he certainly was to tennis in a lot of ways what Jackie Robinson was to baseball.
Hey, I saw you talking about, of course, on the Paul McCartney thing, but the Beatles one day. And I didn't realize until I saw you say it, that in their contracts, their performance contracts, they had the audience had to be integrated.
It's very true.
And
That's a
then
good
you
point,
talked about
Chris.
the song
They
Blackbird.
did a show. They did a show in Jacksonville, and this is the first year. And they were very much believers in civil rights issues, even as young. They were 23, 22, 23 years old at the time. And they had their manager, Brian Epstein, put in the contract, they will not play before a segregated audience.
Right.
Segregated audience. And I'll tell you another quick part of that story. Years later, excuse me, Paul McCartney wrote a song called Blackbird.
Blackbird. Yeah.
And you may or may not know this, but the song was really written as a kind of metaphor for the civil rights movement. Black being blackbird,
Yeah.
a black woman. In England, women were called birds. I'm going to cough again, so give me a second here. Okay. Well, Blackbird was a song, and many years later, he met the two women who were heckled and abused trying to go to school as young kids. And there were two young girls in, I believe it was Arkansas or Mississippi, trying to go to school. And he wrote the song about it. You know, Blackbird, spread your wings. You were only waiting for this moment to be free.
Right.
Backstage, about a decade ago, about 8 years ago, Paul met the two women who were still alive, who were in their 70s, who he wrote the song about. And he was really moved.
He ever met them before? Never
met them before. He'd read about them.
Yeah.
And they didn't even know
that it was about them.
That he wrote the song about them. Is that great?
Amazing. That is wow. That's crazy. That's amazing.
Yep.
See, I never knew the origin of the song until I heard you say that.
Yeah. And Blackbird was in his own subtle way. The Beatles were political, but they weren't as out there politically as a lot of people were or used to be. But that was his symbolic way of giving a nod to the civil rights movement. And he actually said to them backstage, you know, that song was to hopefully inspire people like you and keep up the fight with your friends and family and people who you grew up with, because the fight is not over and the struggle is not over. And so I thought that was one of the coolest things to know that story. You know, I do a thing, and by the way, if anyone's interested and they want to, you know, friend me, is that the term, friend?
Friend me?
Friends.
Yeah.
My handle, if you will, is Roy Allen Firestone, because there's a million Roy Firestones. I'm Roy Allen Firestone on Facebook, and if you want me to friend you, I will. And I tell stories every Monday. Some of it's about music, some of it about sports. I just did a thing about John Batiste, who just won 5 Grammys, and his incredible story. And they're short, they're like 5, 6, 7 minutes, not very long, but it's storytelling, which is what I think truthfully, as an interviewer, I was more a storyteller than an interviewer. I try to tell people's stories with their help and help them tell their stories on my show. So if you'd like, go to Roy Allen Firestone, I'll friend you and put a request in. And if you are interested in more about what I do, I'm talking about the general audience right now, go to royfirestone.com. And if you'd like to say hello, I'm happy to do it.
You know,
another album, a music album.
Yeah,
I have one out. It's called Another Voice. And I do sing. People are surprised that I do sing. I think I hold my own. I don't think I'm the world's greatest singer, but I certainly don't think I'm a bad singer. I also played recently with a band called Blood, Sweat, and Tears, the new version of that band. And I got to sing Fields of Gold.
Thomas, is he still in it?
No, he's not. But it's funny you said that, because today I had lunch with the original drummer named Bobby Columbi, who was the drummer for Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And there's a documentary coming out about Blood, Sweat, and Tears in the next couple of months. And it's going to be seen probably on maybe Amazon or Apple or something like that. But he was the drummer, and he was also the leader of the band. David Clayton Thomas is still singing, but he doesn't sing with Blood, Sweat, and Tears anymore. Very good catch though about David Clayton Thomas.
Do you plan on releasing some more music then?
I hope so. I mean, I love to sing, and there's a lot of music of me on YouTube. I did the national anthem for opening day for the then Washington Redskins. Now they're the Commanders, I guess it is. Is that what they're called?
It's the Commanders now, yes.
Yeah, the Commanders, and there's 75,000 people out there. That was pretty scary.
And that's not an easy song to sing either.
It's not.
No.
The comedian Robert Klein once said, "It's a song written for a goose." You know. You know.
Yeah, Roseanne did her best.
I'll tell you, I've seen some people have some fail. I just have a fundraiser this past weekend in Los Angeles, my 26th year with this fundraiser in my name. And we had Carl Lewis on. And Carl Lewis tried to sing the national anthem once. You may or may not remember this. And he had a lot of trouble with it. But, you know, I have a lot of music on YouTube. I have an album called Another Voice. It's a CD. And there's some samples of that on YouTube. And also I sang Fields of Gold on YouTube. And also for the Miami Dolphins, the 72 championship team. So there's a lot of music of me, but there's a lot of things of me on YouTube. But I'm just so grateful. You know, I mean, I don't take myself that seriously, and I don't try to be critical that critical of myself. I just try to enjoy my life and do all the things I love. And I've been very fortunate to do that.
You know, as a sports fan, you know, I didn't get to grow up watching everybody that I guess idolized because I was too young at some points. But there was two guys I was going to ask if you had ever interviewed. Two people that I kind of hold close to my sports memories of just reading about them. One being Pistol Pete Maravich.
Oh yeah.
And the other one is kind of out there that some people might not remember him, Mark the Bird Fidrich.
Oh yeah, both of them I interviewed. I interviewed Pistol Pete just a few weeks before he passed away. I think I was
remember
the last.
that interview.
Incidentally, that's also on YouTube if anyone wants to see that interview. And strangely enough, we were in the green room before the show, and he says he had a shoulder problem. He says, I just keep having these pains in my shoulder. He says, I think it's from, you know, my athletic career. And he thought he was going to get surgery. It was hard. He was having a kind of heart attack, which eventually killed him. Yeah, he kept saying that his shoulder was bothering him. And of course, the Bird. I love the Bird. Bird was a great guy. He was an innocent. He was not a guy who took life too seriously. I had him on several times, and you know, he died tragically. He was trying to fix a car.
Yes.
The car fell on him, sadly. It was a shame.
But Bird was the first athlete I ever met. And after that, I was hooked.
He was the sweetest. He was such a sweet guy. I mean, and, you know, he probably overextended himself. He had an arm injury. He was never really the same. But that 1 year of glory, the Bird, I don't even know if there's really been anybody like him since.
There was
hard pressed to come up with somebody, but he was a real character, and he drew huge crowds everywhere he pitched, and he pitched really, really well.
There was a childlike wonder to him. You know what I mean? It was like he wasn't built for this. It all kind of came at one time, and he was just like sucking it in. So his energy, every time I've seen an interview with him, it really puts me in a good place when I watch him. That's why I had to ask if you interviewed him, because he was so grateful, it seemed like, to be.
Oh. Yeah, he was grateful, you know, and he was shagging fly balls once and blew his knee out. And otherwise he probably would have pitched for 10 years. He only really had two real seasons, maybe three, in the big leagues. He tried out again with the Red Sox, but it didn't work out. But he was such a great guy. I really miss him. Who's funny and kind of goofy. You know, I just loved him. He was one of my favorites. He really was.
I got to ask you, when you were bat boy for the Orioles, did you ever find the key to the?
You know, what Chris is talking about is the players. When I'm 15 years old. I've never been in a locker room in my life. You know, big league locker room, and it's kind of a rite of passage that they do these things for these young kids who come in as bat boy. And so Brooks Robinson, a couple of other players said, "Hey, go get the keys to the batter's box." Now, I'm not sure what he's talking about, but I thought maybe there was bats where they put in the box. I wasn't talking literally about the batter's box where you swing, but I went running all over the damn spring training facility looking for keys to a batter's box. And then they kept bouncing me from one place to another, running across the field. They also asked me to get some left-handed bats, because we have left-handed hitters, and I never questioned it, because I started saying, hey, maybe I just never heard of it. Maybe there's a different grip or something for left-handers, and I went looking for left-handed bats. You can believe it. And that's what it was like. I mean, he references that too on YouTube when he accepted the honor of being unveiled at the statue. He talked about me for a lot of the acceptance, which was really sweet, that I was this kind of goofball, and which I was. I still am, actually, in some ways.
That makes sense. There's left-handed gloves and right-handed gloves.
Yeah, there has to be a left-handed bat out there somewhere.
Thank you, Chris and Jordan, for making me look better than I probably should. No,
I mean,
but
that makes sense to me.
at the time, I thought there was some kind of a grip on a bat, lefty. I don't know.
And
And
I do have to ask you, you did an interview with Shaq one time, right? After they lost. And he says he's pissed. And you said what? How pissed are you?
Oh, this was after they lost to the Pistons for the championship. And they had ESPN had me go in there and try to interview him and say, well, we want to know your emotional state after losing the world championship. And Shaq goes, I'm pissed. So I said, well, how pissed are you? I don't even know what I was going to ask the next question. How pissed are you? He goes, to the highest level of passivity. I love that line. Highest level of passivity.
Oh my gosh. I have to ask you, because I have to ask you this. Where do you think professional sports is going in the next 5 years? I mean, all professional sports.
Wow. There's a lot of things to unpack there. First of all, in college football, I think this name, image, license, they call them NILs, are going to revolutionize sports, and it's going to become a high bid profession. It is profession now, because these players are getting paid hundreds of thousands, in some cases millions of dollars, and it's going to, I think, really make it hard for a lot of schools to compete financially. That's in college football. Also, I think baseball has got some challenges too. They're trying to revolutionize the game. Next year, they're talking about clock on the mound because people are impatient. We're seeing, all kinds of different things that are happening in sports. I mean, football is going through its issues with CTE and brain injuries. But I do have one major concern with the future of sports, and that's the expense. I think to get a decent ticket, I'm not saying there aren't tickets that are affordable. Of course there are, but a lot of them are in the bleachers or high up, nosebleeds. And you can't go to a basketball game in the NBA and walk out of there for less than $200-300 or more.
Which is funny now because they have sponsorships on there. You know what I mean? Like they didn't have sponsorships 10-12 years ago. Right. And now, they're like little walking billboards each one. So you would think.
They're going to have it with baseball too, as you know. I think they may have already started that yet. But my concern is that we're going to price the average, middle class to, more challenged financially fan out of the game. And it's going to be too expensive, prohibitively expensive. And I'm very worried about that. By the way, also in concerts too. Concerts are ridiculous now to go to if you want to see a superstar.
Right.
And it's not that anyone owes anybody everything, but they should try to make, I think, some decent seats available, but it's greed. And I think baseball and football and basketball all responsible, as well as the entertainment business, other entertainment.
When I was a kid, grew up in Cincinnati. You could buy a ticket for $3.
Right. I remember when I came to Los Angeles. I came to Los Angeles in 1977. That's a long time ago. That's 45 years ago. But
I was just saying, it's like 10 years ago, isn't it?
It seems like it. But I tell you the truth. I remember you could get a box seat for $550.
Yeah.
And now it's $550.
Yeah.
And it's not even just that. I mean, think about it. You were a bat boy for the Orioles, and I'm not. And before we go any further, I'm not speaking of like COVID or anything like that, because this was going on before that happened. But serious fan interaction has been taken away. I mean, I remember meeting some of my athletes. Now they got big nets all over the baseball field. Like you can't even I don't understand that. I don't think it's. I'm just personally saying I don't think it's good for the game. And the other part to the question is, do you think that their salaries are affecting the game? That we got some big salaries.
Well, we have Justin Upton of the Angels is going to get $28 million this year for sitting out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just one example, of course, but there are Max Scherzer is making in 1 year by himself more money than the entire Oriole payroll and the Pirate payroll. I mean, there's something crazy about that. So I don't know. I mean, I think the salaries, listen, I've always been pro union. I've always been pro player, but what about the fan? What about the fan who can't afford to do this anymore?
When is enough enough is my question. I mean, because every year they get bigger. And again, I hope everybody gets $1 million. I mean, millions of dollars. I think that's great. But I think that enough has to be enough because it makes you untouchable just to the random person. I mean, yeah.
The average salary in Major League Baseball is average salary is $770,000. And there are people who are making 20, 30. There is even one that's making $40 million. The NBA is the same. Pro football is the same. Patrick Mahomes is going to make $50 million in a year.
Yeah.
Not that he's not great, but 50 million, somebody's got to pay that bill. And it's not always going to be television. Television is part of it, but the live gate is part of it too. And you keep jacking up the prices and people can't afford to go or don't want to go. And I think sports you can't go back. Once you get to a certain level, you're not going to say, oh, this year we're going to bring it, cut it in half. No, that's not going to happen.
Well, even the food is so expensive.
Yes.
Oh, it's horrible.
The $8 bottled water. How about that?
Did you see the Braves selling a hamburger for like $150?
What? Really?
You have to look that up. Their championship burger.
Jeez Louise.
Was he made out of gold or something?
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think that it's never going to go back to the way it was. That a lot of our society isn't going to go back to the way it was. Maybe that's a good thing for our society in some respects. But for sports and for the affordability of sports, I think it's a shame because I think you are seeing people finally priced out of going to a live sporting event. I paid $160 for a good seat at a Dodger game last year. 101 ticket.
Holy cow.
Yeah. And,
wow.
It was very challenging. I'm not by any means crying poverty, but it's still a lot of money. You bring a couple of people with you, you're looking at $400, $500, $600 for an evening.
Yeah, it's hard for families.
Yeah, it
How
just
in the
is.
world do you not get comp tickets at the Dodgers game?
Well, I used to do that, but I like to go sometimes myself and just enjoy the game, not worry about comps. They don't really comp, frankly. They don't comp people anymore either. That's another thing.
Yeah, they don't, do they? Yeah.
They really don't. They stopped doing that. They
stingy.
stopped. I used to get a pair of Laker tickets every game, every night with a parking pass when I first came to Los Angeles because I was reporting. But they don't even do that anymore. Nor should they really in some respect. But I just wish that the prices of tickets could be more reasonable and they make available at least a few thousand seats every game for any sport that are even if you have to do a lottery, you somehow get it, for $10, you can get great seats. It would be great to see that.
Yeah, going to the game as a kid was a big deal for me. I go to Reds and Bengals and all that stuff. And in the Bengals games, they'd open the doors at halftime. And if the stands were full, you could just walk in and watch the second half for free. Yeah. So, I mean, and you were kind of in touch with the players, and it was a big deal to be able to see.
I think 9/11 had something to do with it too. Yeah. And I think there's been physical threats to certain players. We've seen it, violence. We've seen players. And we saw one year. Remember that? I don't know if you remember the year the coach got beat up by some crazy fan. Yeah. I mean, I think there has to be security, especially in the very, very tense times we're in.
Of course.
But by the same token, kids should have access to some of these players. By the way, I think it should also be in a contract. I'm talking about in this case, baseball, for baseball players to have to sign for a certain amount of time every game.
The Arizona Diamondbacks used to do that.
I agree.
Yep. Cal Ripken, to his credit, he is to sign for 45 minutes before and after every game. Unbelievable. And you don't see that much anymore.
Hey, speaking of that, did you collect a lot of stuff?
Oh, yeah. You should see my house. I'll just show you one little thing. Hold on a second. Let me just get on. Well, this is not a visual show, but I'll show it anyway.
Oh, no, we'd love to see it.
This is just one. I have about I guess 30 helmets that were given to me over the years. I don't know if you can see this.
Yeah.
Is that Joe Willie right there?
That's Joe Willie. I don't see it. I don't know how I can get.
Oh, I can see it right there. That's Joe Willie Namath right there.
Yeah, and he
Mr.
signed that for me many years ago. I have many helmets, Packers and Steelers and Lion, all of them, all over my house. My kids grew up with all this stuff.
What's your favorite piece of sports memorabilia?
Babe Ruth baseball. I have one signed by Babe.
That is awesome.
I have something signed by Jackie Robinson too, which is pretty cool. But Ted Williams signed a bat for me. I think I mentioned this earlier in the interview. He wrote a whole letter to me on this bat. It was fantastic, which I still have that. I have a signed poster by Jesse Owens, who
wow.
Some people remember and some people don't or know who he is, but Jesse Owens was the legend of all legends. And you know, I have a lot of memorabilia in this house. I have like 8 cameras always, and I'm a big Beatles collector too, which I mentioned before. And so, you know, I wasn't going to be a collector, but so much was given to me. I didn't want to throw it out. And I look up and all of a sudden I got 300 pieces all over the house.
I'm a hoarder. I understand. I keep all that stuff. I mean, I love all those memories. It's fun. It's fun to look back, and it's something to give to a family member that would want something like that.
Yeah, definitely. No question about it.
That's really cool. So I have to ask, because you're known for making people cry. How many people actually cried?
I'm so glad you brought that up, Chris, because we did five or close to 6,000 interviews. We actually went back in our files to see how many people cried on the show. There were less than 20 out of 6,000 people. And so for people to say, oh, all he does is make them cry, which, by the way, Jerry Maguire came to me because of that. So I'm not really knocking it. We really didn't have, I think we had more laughs on our show than tears. A lot more laughs. We had all kinds of comedians did our show. As I said, George Carlin was on 3 times, Jerry Seinfeld a few times. Don Rickles was on with regularity. We just had a blast doing it. And, you know, as I said before, if nothing ever comes to me for the rest of my life, I could still be very, very grateful that I had a great run doing what I did, loved doing what I did, and some tears, but mostly humor and mostly just good conversation. And that's what I hope that I'm about.
Who was the most surprising person that cried? What shocked you as far as crying?
Well, Rodman was early on. He was one.
That was a pretty good one, though. I mean, that was.
I love that interview. When he said he wanted Madonna. He was going to be her material boy. I died.
You know what's funny about that, Jordan, is that Rodman. I just interviewed him about a few months ago for this new show, Goats, which will be on in May. Look for it. And he started crying again. It happened again. Isn't that funny? Isn't that weird?
He's a special emotional person. Like I don't know. You know, I don't think people understand him, and I'm not saying that I know him, but I don't know. Like just going through what he's went through in life and everything like that. You can feel that there's a vulnerability to him that's not with a lot of people.
I think that's so true, and I also think that Rodman. You know, he was abandoned a few times. He had some bad boy in him, so to speak. He was arrested for shoplifting. He, at one point, he said in the interview, he lived at the Dallas-Fort Worth airport, lived in the airport.
Yes.
And, you know, he had a very, very troubled life, and he got into a lot of alcohol and drug issues. And he had, you know, his daughter is a great soccer player.
She's very good. Trinity is fantastic soccer.
Yes. And, you know, so he had some issues with getting to see his children, and some of it was self-inflicted, but, you know, he was an emotional guy, and he had a lot of emotion in his life, and he wore his emotions on his sleeve.
He just wanted to belong to something.
I think so.
His Hall of Fame speech was kind of a tearjerker too.
Oh yeah,
it was.
Definitely.
It was. Well, you know, I know that we're kind of at that part of the interview, and I wanted to ask you, you know, looking back, what would you tell a young Roy Firestone? Like, what advice would you give to the Roy Firestone that's just starting out in life?
Well, that's a very important question to me, because I do get people all the time asking me my advice for the business. And all I can tell you is I mean, as cliched as it may be, is you can't give up. If you really love something, you just find your way, and just don't give up, and don't be guided by fear that you can't do something. Because I was, for a lot of my early part of my life in this business, I was afraid I wasn't good enough. And if you feel long enough that you're not good enough, you won't be good enough. And there's room for humility, but there's also room for belief in self. And I think that I would emphasize to the young Roy Firestone, don't let fear control you. Just keep pushing forward, and things will work out the way they're supposed to work out.
I'm getting a little.
Chris said he brought some Kleenex on today, so we were we were preparing ourselves.
Don't make me cry, Chris.
Well, you know what? I hope that you have your Brooks Robinson voice with you right now, because I hate to say it, we haven't recorded any of this. So, just kidding.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the show. And I once again, I'll tell the folks, if you want to buy a book. By the way, I donate to Animal Rescue for the children's book I just wrote called Kobe and a Boy Named Roy. My dog was named and adopted after we lost Kobe Bryant, and I wrote a book about it for children, little kids. And I have 3 other books. And if you'd like to buy them, you go to royfirestone.com. And if you don't want to buy them, that's fine. But if you also want to friend me on Facebook, it's Roy Allen Firestone. And I've had a hoot doing this, and I appreciate you having me on.
Roy,
what an honor.
You, any kind of fears you had, you overcame.
Thank you. I like to think I like to think I did too. But thank you for having me on.
I gotta say this, you talk about the greats of all time, Babe Ruth and all that stuff, but I'll go one step further. Babe Ruth is the Roy Firestone of baseball. Michael Jordan's the Roy Firestone of basketball.
Well,
that's how much
that's more than generous. Let's just say that's more than generous. But I appreciate that, Chris, and thank you, Jordan, for joining us also and being part of this interview. And I hope the folks enjoy the interview.
It was an honor, Mr. Firestone. Thank you humbly for your time.
Thank you. Thanks again, Jordan. You take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, sir.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye-bye.